What's happening, everybody? It's Big Ten today. I am Anthony Hare, alongside my guy Jake Lutz. Jake Butt in the house right now, getting ready to talk some spring football. Big show. We are not only talking spring football from this past weekend, spring football coming up this weekend on the network and beyond. I mentioned Kirk Cignetti, the Indiana Hoosiers coach, will join us as well. And of course, the WNBA draft. Megan McCune will be here in a few minutes to break down everything we saw last night. Jake, I do want to take you back to a time many moons ago when you were a young football player, before your accolades and your tight end awards and everything else. What did spring football mean to a young Jake Butt in Ann Arbor?
Well, I was an early enrollee too, which has now become a more common practice in college football. And it was my first experience in the big house. It was my first game where, you could actually put a stamp on it and say there was a win or a loss, or a winner and a loser. And I just remember the nervousness, the excitement, feeling the opportunity of what this game could be. I've been having a good spring, and I really wanted to put a conclusion on it to show coaches, hey, spring ball, really, you don't make the team, but you earn opportunities. It gives you a starting point in camp. So I made a few plays and blocked decently well, and I just remember leaving the stadium saying, you know what, maybe I can play at this level. Your family's in the stands. It concludes those 15 practices. It's just great for a young player to get that first experience and taste of what college football really is.
Well, there's plenty of that on the field this past weekend. That dovetails nicely into today's big story, where there were 3 different Big Ten football teams on the field for the spring game. Ohio State, Penn State, and Purdue were all out there. The Scarlet defeated the Gray 34-33. Will Howard got the reps with the first team. Penn State was out there. The White defeated the Blue 27-0. Drew Aller had a big day passing the football, and hammered down, defeated Boiler up 17-13 at Ross-Ade Stadium, where Jake was watching Hudson Card get the first team reps at QB. Let's go ahead and start in Columbus, Jake, where Ohio State, of course, the anticipations of their national championship pursuits and everything else, with the new talent that is there in Columbus, what Ryan Day has at his disposal at quarterback. What were your overall impressions of what you saw from the Buckeyes?
A lot of what we talked about last week, I felt, came to fruition. The defense absolutely stood out, and we can dive deeper into that in a second. And this is true for Penn State and Ohio State. A windy day, that's the context, because we're going to talk about the quarterbacks. But, hey, it's spring football, which means this isn't a real game, which means it's not always as smooth operationally. We had heard so much about Julian Sayin and how he was making this quarterback battle, and yet I think the young guys struggled a little bit, and the veterans actually played well. Will Howard probably had, one of his best days throughout the spring, it seemed like. Devin Brown did some nice things, even with his legs. Interesting to hear Ryan Day talk about how he wants to include that more in the offense this year. And it made me think back to my childhood in Columbus and playing against Ohio State, where you had Terrell Pryor, you had Braxton Miller, J.T. Barrett, Justin Fields. Those offenses would scare the crap out of you, man, because they were already so talented, and then a quarterback that can run the ball is just so threatening. So I felt the veteran quarterbacks won the day, but again, it's one practice that doesn't trump the full spring. And that defense is absolutely loaded. I was writing all my words here: disruptive, dangerous, destructive.
Oh, a lot of D words. I like the alliteration. Yeah.
Extremely deep. And again, Jim Knowles, this is a complex defense. It's aggressive. Each year that you learn the intricacies means you can go deeper in understanding what's trying to be accomplished. And what showed up, particularly in some of these third down packages, was that aggressive, downhill, high pressure, suffocating Jim Knowles defense. I thought they did a great job generating pressure. On the flip side, I think there's still room for improvement for Ohio State's offensive line.
Okay.
When you think about all the talent, we know the skill position. Great to see Ibuka make highlight plays. We know we're excited about Jeremiah Smith. The backfield's loaded. But, that game in late November against Michigan, they have a Ferrari right now. But the O-line is the engine, right? That car is only going to go as fast as the engine. Because when you're playing Michigan, they got a great defensive line: Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. If the O-line can't play dominant or struggles to protect whoever the quarterback is, then it doesn't exactly matter what's on the outside. So much to be excited for in Columbus. I expect the O-line to be improved. It's a natural progression, but I think that's where Ohio State has to dominate, and it'll be in the trenches.
I'm here for all the Jake Butt metaphors, by the way. Let's see how many of them we can squeeze in throughout the show. The engine, the Ferrari, you name it, everything else. So last season, we saw Ryan Day do something he really hadn't done much of before. He began the season with a QB rotation, and this year, still some uncertainty at quarterback because we haven't seen any of the guys there take major snaps for the Buckeyes, although Devin Brown was a part of that early season rotation last year. Do you see, is it plausible that that could be a formula again for Ryan Day and Chip Kelly?
It absolutely could be, but no coach will tell you that that's what they want. Okay. You know, every coach wants to have this decided. And I've been a part of a few quarterback battles at my time at Michigan. You know, Jake Rudock transferred in from Iowa. It was him versus Shane Morris.
Yeah, right.
Wilton Spate, John O'Corn, Shane Morris. My senior year, there was a battle there. And I think one of the biggest things that, you know, aside from the X's and O's and the throwing the football, your quarterback for the great teams is the voice of your locker room. He's the clear leader. And when you have a quarterback battle going around, it's harder for one guy to step up and say, this is my team. What if you're wrong? Mm-hmm. So I think in a perfect scenario, what Ryan Day would like is to have one guy separate in that early part of fall camp so they can start to say, hey, here's the keys to the team. We have a roster that can win a national title. You go lead these guys.
And if they don't separate until in the fall camp, maybe you're less likely to have guys hit the portal as well, depending on how these things
That's a whole other piece of this.
Yeah, yes. Right. No doubt. And the portal window is opening today as we speak here. But let's go to State College, where Penn State took the field. They had the blue and the white going at it. And James Franklin, we talked last week about the continuity he provides at the top of things. Each new coordinator, Kotelnicki and Allen out there, offensively, defensively, some special teams seen as well at Beaver Stadium. What stood out to you about what we saw from the Nittany Lions?
Okay, one thing, again, the context matters because the defense looks strong. The defense is going to be great. It was great to see Abdul Carter flying around and making plays. The secondary was able to force some turnovers. A.J. Harris, the new cornerback, transferred in from Georgia. I think he had 7 tackles in a PBU. Defense looks great, okay? That 4-2-5 scheme with Tom Allen now, okay, defense is good. So what about the offense? Singleton and Allen didn't play, top 2 running backs. Tyler Warren, your top tight end, didn't play. We heard James Franklin talk about Keandre Lambert-Smith. They're going to part ways and go a different direction. You know, Drew Aller didn't even play on the same team as Julian Fleming, who may be their wide receiver 1. A bunch of offensive line pieces didn't play. So I say that to say this. Again, a windy day. There was some great things done by Drew Aller. The talent is clearly there, but I think it left something to be desired. And again, it's the spring game, so I say all that to open, just to put it into context. You can't read too much into it. Kotelnicki's offense, I expect, just listening to the guys talk, there will be motions, there will be shifts, there's going to be a bunch of different personnels, a lot more creativity in the season. You're not going to show that in the spring game. So again, I say that to put it into context. What I will say is encouraging is who's going to be this wide receiver 1? It felt like Drew Aller was going to his guy Harrison Wallace, who I remember talking to coaches last year. This guy is speedy. He's got the chance to be a dangerous weapon. He had 5 catches for about 72 yards. That's really encouraging. They need an alpha dog in that room, especially with Lambert-Smith transferring out. And you know I got to talk about tight ends. So they had a true freshman, Andrew Rappelier. He had 3 catches, nice big catch late in the 4th quarter for a touchdown, but he had 8 targets on the day. Okay, when you're an early enrollee, when you're a true freshman, we can read into the fact if the ball's coming your way 8 times, you've done something to build trust in that quarterback room. Right. And really, the Penn State's done a great job of developing tight ends and putting them into the NFL. I know Iowa's going to capture the headlines, but Penn State's put some guys into the NFL. Theo Johnson's up next. So, is it going to – they need to elevate the weapons in the wide receiver room, but don't be surprised if the tight ends step up as well.
When you think about Drew Aller, you were talking about him a moment ago, going into this fall, last season he was remarkably efficient. He protected the football at such a high rate for a first-year starter. How would you see the potential for Drew Aller taking more risks, more chances with the football? Would that be advisable this year?
It'll be as advisable as the context of do you feel the offense and the play calling gives you a chance. Like, you know, I don't want to take a risk if there's a 25% chance of winning, you know, but hey, we say 50-50 balls, sure, you have to take some of those. You know, last year, that was one of the big problems with Penn State is even though they were scoring points, the explosive plays weren't quite there.
Yeah.
But Kotelnicki's what I fully expect to see is much more creativity, which opens the chance for explosive plays. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Bo Prabila on the field and we see two quarterbacks at times. So he clearly has the arm talent to do it. Again, it's the spring game.
Yeah.
I expect they absolutely have to emphasize that.
Well, let's transition to West Lafayette, where you were. And one of the things that really stood out to me and just kind of checking things out with Purdue was the juice in Ross-Ade Stadium, man. I mean, it looked like the crowd was there. They were into it. Just set that scene for me before we talk about anything else. I mean, how energized was the stadium?
Well, they redid it last year to open the stadium. And that tunnel, I walked it, I'm like, oh, man, they got speakers in there. And as they walked out, they got the smoke coming.
Yeah.
And, one thing about Ryan Walters is, he's a younger coach. He's going to recruit well, and he's going to bring the juice. And you're exactly right. It did feel like that. Even down on the field, it was competitive. That's going to be a piece of this because you think of those teams in the middle pack of the Big Ten, and Purdue's got a really tough schedule. They've revamped the roster. But can they play confident? Can they make a mistake and then get back right on track to who they want to be? I'll tell you one thing that stood out. The offensive line, they were without a few key guys that weren't playing in the spring game, guys that were injured last year. That offensive line is night and day. I mean, Hudson Card, when you look at it, he had a lot of time. Operationally, the ball was out on time where it needed to be. There's a lot of question marks in the Big Ten on, who's going to be the top quarterback. Hudson Card was honorable mention all Big Ten. He's got the talent to do it. Was beat up last year. I thought the offensive line looked good. And then they revamped this wide receiver room, man. Deion Burks is out. They bring in a bunch of guys, a couple young freshmen, C.J. Smith. He looked good. Traymar Harris was another guy that stepped up. So Max Clare's the tight end. There's so much new with so many of these teams. It is the era of transfer portal. So I think it's got to be encouraging for Purdue fans to sit out there and say, hey, our quarterback is back, and yet he looked comfortable spreading the ball around to a lot of new pieces. I also like their young quarterback, Marcos Davila.
Yeah, right.
Looked good. As an early enrollee, he looked sure of himself. The ball was out where it needed to be. I mean, he should be going to his high school prom. I thought that was really encouraging because Hudson Card will be gone, and you do have a succession plan now with Marcos Davila.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him. I saw him in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl, and I described him there as just a mature passer. He's got some nuance to the way he throws the ball, some confidence there.
That's exactly how he looked out on the field.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought his name up. Really excited about him, as Purdue fans should be as well. Took the reps with the second team. We're not done taking spring football reps here on the show, but we're going to stop looking in the rearview mirror, start to look ahead to the games on the docket this weekend. Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana, and USC amongst the teams. But also, let's hear from the mouth of the maestro. Curt Cignetti is going to be on the field on Thursday night. There's Coach. He'll join us next.